Welcome. Every planet in a chart or a horoscope contributes to a person's karmic journey. But some planet, such as Saturn, may contribute more, or it might seem that the Saturn is contributing more, positive or negative, because Saturn is also said to be a karmic planet. On the internet, a wealth of information and material is available about Saturn. Saturn's influence on personality type, health, disease, career, interpersonal relationships. That also means a married life. But what do you do with all this information? How can you tell how much influence Saturn has on the horoscope? When you are looking at a horoscope, do you have a methodical approach to interpreting the Saturn's influence or the Saturn's impact on a horoscope? That that influence might be strong or that might be negligible, but we have to figure out a methodical approach to interpreting Saturn's impact. And that is what we are going to do in this video. The first thing that you have to look at is the intensity or the degree of influence Saturn might be having in a horoscope. So the method for finding that out is that if Saturn is in the Lagna, this you have to see in the Lagna chart. If Saturn is placed in the Lagna, or if Saturn is in its own star in the Lagna, this you have to see in the KP Kaspa chart. And this also, when we say Saturn in its own star, then we also mean that Saturn should be in Cancer or it should be in Cancer and Scorpio, Scorpio and the Pisces. So these are the only three zodiac signs where the Saturn star appears. So Saturn has to be in these three signs. So that means that either the Cancer ascendant or the Scorpio ascendant or the Pisces ascendant is rising, and Saturn is in its own star, in the ascendant and in its own star. So that way you can see that Saturn is going to influence the ascendant cusp very powerfully by this particular placement. Then of course the Capricorn or the Aquarius, this could be in the Lagna chart. And then Moon is Saturn star. Irrespective of whether Moon is placed in the first house or fifth house or 10th house, it doesn't matter. If it is in Saturn star, then the horoscope is said to be having a Saturn's influence. So this is and then of course there are some other weaker influences of Saturn in the ascendant, but that I have ignored. So we are just concerned with a reasonably strong influence of Saturn in the horoscope. So there could be one or multiple reasons out of these 4 or 5 that can come together and start influencing a person's chart from the Saturn's point of view. So only when you see this kind of influence, then you have to, at that point, then you have to put a note when you are doing a horoscope reading. Then you can say that you can write something like this. This horoscope is very strongly, or moderately influenced by Saturn. So we have already listed here that what is a very strong or moderate influence of Saturn. Due to, and in the due to you might want to write the reason by interpreting the horoscope, that why the Saturn is moderately influencing the ascendant or very strongly. So as a result, Saturn will have a noticeable effect on a person's personality type, the character sketch, health and disease, career, and interpersonal connection, the relationship, the married life. So this is how, when you are writing a horoscope, when you're reading a horoscope, you are uh, writing about the character sketch and you see the Saturn influence, then you can mention in your reading that there is a noticeable effect of Saturn in the horoscope, and that is going to reflect in the various aspect of a person's life. And what are those aspects? So some of them I am going to discuss. Since we have seen that a horoscope has Saturn influence, then it is a good idea to mention those aspects where the Saturn's influence is going to be noticeable. The first thing is about the physical features because of the Saturn's influence. So you can write that when this person grows up and has a more defined physical structure, then some of these physical features might stand out. So what are these? The build might be thin, bony, and pale. The complexion might be dark. Now, this dark complexion is a very relative kind of terminology, because in the West, people are not as dark as in the East. But comparatively, they might have a little dark complexion. Of course, in a country like India, there could be a more noticeable complexion, dark people versus less dark people. The face, and like I mentioned, that when a person grows up and the features are more stable, the physical features, then the Saturn people do really, there is some kind of a sadness that you can see on their face, and they look to be depressed, or they have some kind of a melancholic state. So that's another noticeable physical feature. So you can write like this, that generally the physical features may be, and then so this is how you can write about the person's physical feature. Then they have eyes with thick eyebrows, and another the very noticeable feature is about Saturn is that they appear to be much older than their age. And another thing is the slight deafness, that seems to be some permanent defect in the Saturn influenced people. Uh, they have certain slight deafness. So this is a part of the physical feature. And like I mentioned, depending on the degree of Saturn's influence in the chart, you might want to embellish your language. This is just a very generic kind of a language, but you might want to embellish it. One karmic baggage that is associated with Saturn is that it is deemed to be an unfortunate or unlucky planet. So in a horoscope, when there is the influence of Saturn, then you can write that small efforts in a person's life, you can write it like this: small efforts in your life might be marked with delays, disappointment, disharmony, dispute, difficulty. This is what Professor K.S. Krishnamurti has mentioned about Saturn's unfortunate or unlucky side of the Saturn. So you can point this out when reading a horoscope with Saturn's influence. Small effort in your life might be marked with delays, disappointment, disharmony, dispute, and difficulty. A horoscope deeply influenced by Saturn when it comes to the education, and at some point you have to face these questions about what subject my son or daughter might be studying. So now there are two things. One is that these subjects, geology, geography, history, archives, old manuals, monuments, these are something that a certain influenced person is very fond of. They are just deeply interested in all these subjects. But you should not say that the person will go and only in these kind of subject studies, because depending on the dasha at that age. And then there are other compulsions also. Saturn influence horoscope might become a doctor, engineer, or go into finance or some other field, but they are always deeply interested in these subjects. So if you find some reasonably good career positions, and in these days some new fields have opened up, and they create a good paying jobs. So the Saturn influence people, if they want to go to these kind of a career, and if you encourage them, then they will always be thankful to you. Uh, so don't discourage your son or daughter to distract from these subjects. Even if they are studying engineering or if they are studying medicine, they will have a fondness for these subjects. You should always encourage them, and as a parent, you can go with them and visit ancient monuments. They have a phenomenal interest in all these subjects, and they will always be thankful to you that you help them keep this interest alive in your heart, especially when the Saturn has a influence on uh, the the ninth cusp. Here I am talking about ninth cusp. So you have to look at the cusp chart, the KP cusp chart, and if Saturn is a significator of ninth cusp, then you can be sure that this person is going to be a lifelong student or will have an interest in this kind of a subject. But like I mentioned, it doesn't mean that a person will necessarily just go into jobs related to these subjects. That a person might become or might choose any subject to study, but this is something that is very noticeable for the Saturn influence people, their interest in these kind of subjects. When it comes to the relationship, whether it is uh, a matrimonial relationship or bonding with the friends, the Saturn influence people are very true, very reliable, they are honest, sincere, and they are very faithful also, and they can become a very long term friends or partners. But there is one thing that need to be noticed when it comes to the matrimonial relationship. See, the traditional that code, that eightfold matchmaking thing, that doesn't work these days. So when you are doing a matchmaking, then you have to look at the kind of influence the planets have on the ascendant, and if there is an influence of Saturn, then you have to mention some of the Saturn's positive and negative traits. In matrimonial relationship, the Saturn influence people, they tend to look for partner that are more older than their age, or at least look older than their age. Second thing is that, let's say the girl is a Mars influence and the boy is a Saturn influence, then this relationship usually is not very deep bonding, because Mars has a certain energy that Saturn lacks. Saturn is a passive, cold kind of a planet. So rather than focusing on the Ashtakut, the eightfold thing, when you are doing a matchmaking, then you should look at the personality type defined by a planet. So that will be very helpful. I remember a few years ago, uh, a priest from a temple known to me came to visit me with his horoscope, and I noticed that there was a reading on that horoscope, and the astrologer has mentioned that because of the Saturn's influence, this person might deal in lead, iron, black articles, and then quarry, metal, mines. You see, whenever a person sees or an astrologer sees the influence of Saturn, they quickly jump to this conclusion that this person might be has something to do with iron, lead, and black articles. And so this was a completely way off. This person was a priest, and he had nothing to do with all these things. But blindly just mentioning whatever Saturn represents as a part of a person's career, it's not a very good reading. So this is something that Saturn related people are interested in. If they go in this line, they will find themselves at home. So this is the natural thing that the Saturn represents. But when you are looking at the career thing, then you don't have to look at the ascendant and all that. Then you have to look at the 10th house. You have to look at the 2 and 6 and 10. That's significator. And then you have to look at the Dasha, Bhukti and all. And then you have to figure it out that what profession a person might go in, irrespective of what his or her ascendant is. And then depending on the Dasha, sometimes the profession or the career, they also changes. So whenever you are offering about or you are making a remark on the career side of a person influenced by Saturn, then rather than mentioning all these things, you should mention these points. See, a Saturn influenced person, so some of the personality traits that are outstanding are like he is very economical. He has a very fondness for saving things, and then he has the power to keep secrets, and then he wants to be stable in some career. He has that self-control. He has a sense of duty. He is very trustworthy. So all these traits. Now, if a person goes in any field, he or she could become a doctor, an engineer, or maybe an IT professional, or a clerk, or might be in a finance department. But given some of these noticeable tendencies of the Saturn, any job that brings in focus their ability to do these kind of things, or their personality traits, the Saturn will be very happy. For example, if you make him an in charge of a department that is responsible for saving water, saving electricity, or uh, or waste control, the Saturn will be very happy. A Saturn influenced person will be very happy, and he or she can show excellent result in that kind of a department. So keeping all these things in mind, you have to look at what Saturn influence people can do in any field. And Saturn is a planet that they want to be stable at one place. So as a HR, you should be appreciative of this particular Saturn's trait. And then you might have seen employees which are when they stick to a corporation or a company, then they remain there for years and years and years after years. They might be slow, they are lazy because of the Saturn, but their loyalty and their idea of being stable at one place is very remarkable. So, and like I mentioned, so when you are writing about the career, then you should mention that to the Saturn influence horoscope, that because of your these tendencies, whatever this word is important, whatever career you join according to the 2, 6 and 10 and the Dasha, Bhukti and Antra, you might want to stick to a department that matches with your core inclination and tendencies. That will be very helpful advice. The disease. Now for the disease also, one has to look at the significator of the 6th house, 8th house and the 12th house, rather than just mentioning for example, Professor Krishnamurti has mentioned that Saturn is responsible for causing the bony system related diseases, and then intoxication, eczema, or these are caused by Saturn. It doesn't mean that a person who has a Saturn's influence is prone to these kind of a diseases. No, it's not like that. Because any person with any ascendant from Aries to Pisces can have this kind of a disease, depending on if they are running a disease related Dasha Bhukti, and where Saturn is prominent, then it can cause these kind of a disease to a person born in any kind of ascendant. So this has nothing to do with you can't possibly just attribute these diseases to the Saturn influenced people. I have seen many horoscope reading where they just blindly write that these kind of diseases might happen, and though none of these diseases ever happen. So in the case of Saturn, there are two things that you should always mention when you see a horoscope where Saturn is quite prominent. Then the one thing is that Saturn has something to do with chronic, making things chronic. So you can always mention that this person, whenever he or she falls sick, it might take more time for them to recover, and if they have some serious illness, then it usually tends to become chronic. So that makes more sense. And that disease could be any disease. It could be related to Jupiter, or it could be related to Mars, or any other planet. But because of the influence of the Saturn, the tendency of that disease will become chronic. So that's the first thing. Second is the moon in Saturn star, or the moon and Saturn in close conjunction, which means about 3 degrees in the same sign. So this causes the depression and the inferiority complex and the fear complex. This is not a good combination. The moon in the Saturn star is not a good combination. Moon might be anywhere in the horoscope, but if it is in Cancer or Scorpio and Pisces, where the Saturn star appears, so this combination, the moon in Saturn star is, and of course in Krishnamurti Paddhati, when moon in Saturn star is also a significator of 6th, 8th and 12th house, then this depression, sadness and the inferiority complex, they are very noticeable, but still they are noticeable. So these two things you can point it out as a general things for the Saturn influence chart. But like I mentioned, for the disease and all that, you have to look at the KP rules about the planet that signify the disease, and then the Dasha when the whole thing is going to manifest. Now, as an astrologer, you are expected to suggest and recommend some remedy for the horoscope that are heavily influenced or moderately influenced by the Saturn. Let's look at what Professor Krishnamurti has said. The color of Saturn is blue. When one is filled with sorrow or depressed or downcast on one's luck, low spirited, or feeling depressed and dejected because of the Saturn influence, then he has mentioned that never use blue color for tablecloth, for wall painting, wall color, etc. So basically, he's saying that keep away from the blue color. And even Professor Krishnamurti says that one should not wear the blue sapphire, neelam, when when somebody is going through the low phase and Saturn's remedy is required. Now, I find this thing very impractical. The wall painting, wall color, etc. See, if you are living in a home with your parents and there are other your brothers, sisters, other members of the family, and now you start removing the blue color and blue objects from the home, it's not practical. It might be suitable for some other family member. So this is not very practical kind of an approach, that you should not be using blue color at all, or you should avoid blue color. So this is not a very practical approach. Second is that the blue sapphire. So there's a lot of apprehensions about wearing blue sapphire, and I would suggest that you should refrain from wearing these gemstones. Nobody actually knows the correct process of wearing the gemstones, and the blue sapphire could be a risky gemstone, and then on top of it, there are a lot of all these fake gemstones in the market. So you might want to avoid this thing. The Professor Krishnamurti has mentioned that use red, symbolizing the character of Mars. Now, rather than using a coral which represents Mars, I can suggest something that might be of interest to few of you, and that is this is called the mudra. And this is the Agni mudra. See, Mars represents the fire element. So this is something that you don't have to pay anything. It doesn't have any cost. Of course, it needs some a little bit of discipline, and that you can learn from some yoga teacher that you might be knowing, that how to do the Agni mudra, because Mars represents the Agni, and the along with this mudra, the letter or the bij letter is the I think Ram. So that bij mantra you have to recite. I am pretty sure you will be able to find a yoga teacher, a competent yoga teacher. He or she might be able to teach you this yoga mudra, the Agni mudra, and the correct method of doing it. So this is something that I want to highly recommend. Rather than wearing coral or rather than experimenting with blue sapphire and all that, don't do that. Now these mudras, the yoga mudra, like Agni mudra, these are not jadoo tona. If you avoid going to a proper teacher and then try to just search on the YouTube, you will find plenty of videos on these mudras. Now, unfortunately, the more popular ones with the YouTube is going to suggest you, they are full of nonsense. They are all bogus, and they tend to make these mudras as if it is some kind of a jadoo tona, a witchcraft. It is not. Mudra is a very, very deep and very profound concept in the Jyotish and also in the Vedanta. So I did a video on the what the five elements are, and so when you watch this video, then you will truly appreciate the deep science and the deep philosophy behind the mudra. So find a proper teacher and do the Agni Mudra rather than wearing the coral and wasting your money on it. Now there are some more resources on Saturn available on my channel. So there is one on the Sade Sati, the Saturn Sade Sati according to the Krishnamurti Paddhati. So this will also help you in extending your knowledge about the Saturn's influence in a horoscope. And then there is another video on the how to interpret and read a Saturn Dasha result. I'm going to put all these links in the description. All these three, the key to understanding the Pancha Tattva, and these two videos. And I'm also planning a video where I will share the KP results of interpreting Saturn for all 12 houses. What happens when Saturn is signifying the first house? What happens when the Saturn is signifying the second house? So that I will do in a separate video. So now with this video, the Saturn's influence on the personality type and the Sade Sati, Saturn Dasha result, and the one coming up on the 12 houses of Saturn. Pretty much all the things related to Saturn will be covered. That's all in this video. Thanks for watching.